Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever really stopped to think about how the simple things on your desk, the stuff you use every day, are actually made? Well, today we're going to trace that exact journey from a raw material all the way to a finished product. And in doing so, we're going to explore the absolutely massive world of industry that makes it all happen.
All right, let's just dive right in. And we're going to start with something super simple, something you probably have within arm's reach right now, a notebook. I mean, it seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? It's just some paper and a binding, right? But the journey it takes from a natural resource to your hands, well, that reveals this incredible, massive global system at work. It's really the perfect way to get started. So think about it. Each one of these steps is part of a much bigger process we call manufacturing. It's all about converting a raw material, in this case, wood, into something much more valuable, your notebook. And this whole system, from the forest to the factory to the store, that's the very foundation of what we call industry. And that right there is the crucial point. An industry isn't just one factory. As you can see from this definition, it's a whole economic system. Yeah, it can be about making goods, like in the steel industry, but it can also be about extracting resources, like coal mining, or even providing services, like tourism. This slide does a great job of showing the whole thing as a flow. On one end, you've got your inputs. That's your raw materials, your labor, power, all that stuff. In the middle, you have the processes. That's the factory work, the part that transforms everything. And then, at the very end, you get the outputs, the finished product, and, of course, the income it generates. This is basically the recipe for how we make almost everything. Okay, so we've got this basic framework down. But how in the world do we make sense of the millions of different industries out there? Well, the easiest way is to start classifying them, sorting them into different categories. And one of the simplest ways to do that is just by looking at their raw materials. Where do they get their stuff? Is it agro-based, using plants and animals? Is it mineral-based, from ores dug out of the ground? Maybe it's marine-based, coming from the sea. Or, as we just saw, forest-based, which is exactly where your notebook comes from. You can see right away just how huge the difference in scale can be when you look at these examples. On the left, that's a cotton textile mill, an agro-based industry. And on the right, a mineral-based steel plant. I mean, they're both transforming raw materials, but their processes and the sheer scale of the operation, they're worlds apart. And speaking of scale, that brings us right to the next way we classify things, by size. So on one end of the spectrum, you've got small-scale industries. Think of a local potter or a silk weaver using handcrafted techniques. And then on the other end, you have these massive, large-scale industries that need huge investments and really advanced technology to pump out huge volumes, like a modern car factory. And the last piece of the puzzle here is ownership. Who's running the show? Is it a private company? Is it a public, government-run organization? Or maybe it's a joint venture, or even a cooperative that's owned by the workers themselves. Each of these models has totally different goals and ways of doing things. So let's say you've decided what kind of industry you want. You know what you're making, how big it's going to be, and who owns it. The next giant question is, where in the world do you actually build it? The puzzle of where to locate an industry is kind of like a recipe. You need just the right mix of ingredients, all of them pulling on that central manufacturing plant to make it a success in one particular spot. And here they are, those ingredients. You need your raw materials, power, land, and labor. But you also need the capital to fund the whole thing, transport to move your goods, and a market to sell to. And you know what? Even government policy plays a huge role. Finding that perfect spot is a real balancing act, trying to get all of these factors to line up in the most efficient way possible. Okay, so let's see how all these factors actually play out in the real world. We're going to look at two of the planet's most important industries, iron and steel and cotton textiles. This quote really gets to the heart of it. Steel is the backbone because pretty much everything we rely on is either made of steel, think about our cars and buildings, or it's made by machines that are built from steel. It is truly the foundational material of our modern world. This slide shows a perfect tale of two cities and how location factors can create industrial giants. Jamshedpur in India was strategically built right near rivers and all the key mineral deposits it needed. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh in the USA had local coal and water, but its real secret weapon was the Great Lakes Waterway, which let them ship in iron ores super cheaply. Both cities totally mastered their geography. Now let's switch gears to an industry that's just as old but completely different.
the one that literally makes the clothes on our backs. The cotton textile industry has been around for centuries, and it's evolved from people spinning by hand all the way to today's gigantic mechanized mills.
What's really cool is how different places can follow a similar recipe for success. Take Ahmedabad in India and Osaka in Japan. They both became so dominant that people called them the Manchester of their countries. Both had the right climate and access to water. But here was the key difference. Ahmedabad was surrounded by cotton fields, while Osaka's success depended completely on its port to import every single bale of cotton. And this brings us to a super important point. Industrial dominance, it doesn't last forever. Osaka's famous textile industry has largely been replaced by other things like steel and cars. And Ahmedabad's older mills, well, now they face really tough competition from newer factories with better technology. It just goes to show you that even the most successful regions have to constantly adapt to survive. So, what does all this constant change mean for the future of industry? I mean, what's on the horizon? What's next? Well, the focus is really shifting to what people are calling sunrise industries. These are the emerging sectors, the ones poised for major growth. Think about industries that are built less on physical materials and more on brainpower, information technology, wellness, the whole knowledge economy. For these new industries, the most important location factor isn't a river or a coal mine. It's having access to a skilled workforce and great data infrastructure. So, we started this whole journey with this simple story of a notebook, a product from a forest-based industry. And we've seen how raw materials, location, and ownership all come together to define how we make everything. But that story is always being rewritten. So that leaves us with one last thought. What everyday object that we take for granted today will be completely transformed by the sunrise industries of tomorrow? And what new industrial systems are going to pop up to create it?